Go ahead and start recording also.
Okay, so I'm good to go.
That's there.
And Shane.
Good morning.
Morning, Shane.
Heather, just a quick question before the meeting starts.
Of course.
I know you told me at the time this morning when we reviewed that we didn't have any public comment.
That is correct.
But where would that play in on the agenda if we were to have public comment? I don't see a specific place for that to occur.
We typically would read it into the record as part of the item that the comment was in regards to.
What if it was just somebody coming to speak just generally and not to a specific agenda
We do
item?
not have a general public comment section on our agenda anymore for the TAC.
So if somebody wanted to come as a member of the public and just make a general statement, they would not be able to do that.
That is correct.
Okay. Was there a reason for that? Just out of curiosity?
We still do it for the board of directors. We just don't do it for the transit advisory committee.
Okay. I'd imagine that if that ever has occurred, it's been very rare, huh?
I can't say a time that it occurred with the transit advisory committee. We have had general comments at board meetings.
Yeah, okay. Fair enough, thank you.
Mhm.
So Shane, it's 10 a.m. and we are still short one member, so it'll just be a few minutes. I'll let you know when we have quorum.
Okay, who's speaking right now, please?
Rhonda.
Oh,
Sorry.
thank you, Rhonda. Okay, no,
You're
you're in the
welcome.
training room, so it's hard to tell.
Ah, okay. And I'm wearing a mask
And-
at the moment. Yeah. So
Well, good for you, thank you.
let's see. So let me update. Oh, good. Okay, Dave Wessel's joining us, and he is our person to meet quorum.
Okay, so does that mean we're ready to go,
I
Rhonda?
believe it does. So you can call him.
Awesome. So good morning, everybody. Sounds like we're set to start our meeting. So I'll officially call the meeting to order. I know that this is a public meeting, and the public certainly welcome to attend and to weigh in, but we do not have at this point any public comment. Is that correct, Heather? Okay.
That is correct. Thank you.
Thank you. So we'll go down into a roll call at this point. Rhonda, you going to work us through that?
I will. Thank you, Chairman and members of the TAC. Coconino County, Lucinda Andriani and Christopher Tressler are not expected. They're excused. Coconino County Citizen Representative Jillian Thomas, excused. City of Flagstaff, Shane Dilley.
Here.
Thank you. City of Flagstaff Citizen Representative Kevin Parks.
Good morning, present.
Good morning, thank you. Metro Plan Dave Wessel.
Here.
Thank you, Dave. NAU Aaron Stom.
Here.
Hi, Aaron, thank you. NAU student Maylee Acosta.
Here.
Hello. CCC Kurt Stahl.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. And our Economic Development Representative Gail Jackson is excused. I will turn it back to you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you, Rhonda. Really appreciate that. Next on our agenda is a safety minute by Samuel. Take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the Transit Advisory Committee. This month's safety minute is regarding fatigue in the workplace. Being tired on the job is a major problem in the United States, especially in recent months with the addition of a global pandemic. The pandemic has added more stress at home and in the workplace, which leads to higher rates of fatigue. Fatigue leaves workers performing at lower levels, and this exposes them to a greater chance of injury. During a recent survey, 29,000 workers were asked about workplace fatigue. 38% of those workers reported feeling tired at work within the last 2 weeks. It is important to prevent fatigue while on the job to keep yourself and those around you safe. Here are some practices to prevent or improve fatigue issues. Get plenty of rest. It is recommended to get a minimum of 7 hours of sleep a night. If your work schedule is too demanding or the hours you are working are making you feel fatigued every single day, talk with a supervisor. Sometimes responsibilities or schedules can be altered to improve productivity and safety in the workplace. It is important to understand the side effects of medication before using it at work. Talk with your doctor to make sure he or she understands your work responsibilities to ensure the medication will not interfere with your performance. Take care of your health. Addressing other health issues can greatly improve how you feel at home and at work. Eat a better diet. Food is to humans as gasoline is to a car. If you put dirty gasoline in your car, it will not run well. The same goes for your body. You are the most important safeguard in protecting yourself and others while at work. By using some of the above practices, you can help to prevent fatigue while on the job and keep yourself and those around you safe. Thank you and welcome to the September Transit Advisory Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Short. Appreciate that reminder. I got to tell you, I really appreciate that reminder. So thank you.
Thanks, Mr.
Okay, next we'll move into approval of TAC minutes from our August 5th meeting. I wasn't present for that meeting, so I'll look to somebody else to make the motion. Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved, Kevin.
Kevin, do we have a second?
This is Erin, I second.
Thank you, Aaron. Oh, and Aaron, thank you for stepping up and helping lead that discussion last month, as I was not able to attend.
You're
So I
very
appreciate you.
welcome.
Thank
Yeah,
you
not
very
a
much.
problem. Thanks, Shane.
I also note in these minutes, we've got a second now that Dave, you were you graciously stepped forward to the nomination of vice chair. So I appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Honored to serve under your command, sir.
Yeah, I'm sure. It's an honor for me to work with you this way. So thanks a lot, Dave, for doing that. Any other comments regarding or questions regarding the minutes from last month? Great. We've got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. We'll go now to the review of the draft agenda for the board. And we'll start by the discussion items under A. So we've got approval of the annual report. Lori, you got this one?
Thank you. Good morning, TAC members. Lori
Thanks,
Batiste,
Lori.
manager. Oh, can you hear me?
Yep, we're good. Thank you, Lori.
Okay, sorry, Shane. I'm the Management Services Director, and we're going to review our fiscal year 2021 annual report. Rhonda, next slide, please. So our annual report covers July 1st of 2020 through June 30th of this past year. And I do apologize, the annual report wasn't in your packet. It's going to be sent with the board packets. And our annual report contains a summary of the activities from the prior year, including performance and financial data for all of the provided public transportation systems. So looking back at fiscal year 2021, some of the highlights are here below. I'm happy to say that Mountain Line maintained all programs and employees through the COVID pandemic. There was continued focus on growing the paratransit taxi travel program for those clients. And we also received over $4.9 million in American Rescue Plan and CARES Act funds. And we continued the planning process of a new downtown connection center. Next slide, please. Next slide. So looking at ridership for the city of Flagstaff on our bus, this is a monthly graph that is used to show overall change in ridership by month over the last several years. And this particular one also tracks differences in line as well as link, which is actually Route 10. You can see that it was down throughout the fiscal year, but we definitely started to see a return to prior year numbers towards the end of the year. So hopefully continue to see that. Next slide, please. And this looks at the performance measures of the bus program. We'll look at it for each one, but this looks at passengers, hours, and cost, which helps us evaluate standards for effective and efficient services. And you can see the passenger trips decreased by 56%. The average number of riders per day was at 2,554, and our total cost per hour was actually down 8 cents from the prior year. So we'll take the win. So and we attribute, all of these changes to the COVID pandemic, of course. So next slide, please. And so this is now looking at our paratransit program, the overall ridership trend. And we did actually start to exceed prior year towards the end of fiscal year 2021. So again, just hoping to continue to see the slow and steady growth of all the programs. Next slide, please. And this is specifically, we have our travel taxi program, which actually includes city and county. The graph itself is just the city taxi program, although the data above does combine the two. And so for the city taxi trips, there was an average of 394 trips per month. And actually towards the end of fiscal year 2021 for January through June, that average increased to 406 trips. So slow and steady, but happy to continue to see that increase. So next slide. And so again, looking at the performance measures by the programs, paratransit performed 3.19 trips per hour. And that was providing 6,289 trips to our more than 200 clients. And city taxi supplied 4,732 trips. And that actually results in a savings of over $600,000 compared to those same trips being provided in a van. So we've always recognized that the paratransit service is an expensive service, and I'm always trying to encourage those that can to use the taxi program as well. So next slide, please. Sorry. And then moving into Coconino County, next slide, please. This is looking at the van pool program. This program was started in December of 2015. And in fiscal year 2021, we had approximately 41 users. And that was in up to 5 vans during peak service. And actually, in this program, total trips were only down 3% from the prior year. Next slide, please. Okay. And then this is looking at the taxi program again. As I said, that top data does include combined of city and county. And then the graph below is just Coconino County trips. And we averaged 55 trips per month, and that really stayed pretty steady throughout the year. December actually was a little bit high at 70 trips per month, but otherwise stayed at the average. So next slide, please. And looking at performance measures for those programs, Vanpool performed 8,646 trips, and that was about 85,000 miles. The county taxi program provided 661 trips, and that demand did drop by about 29%. Next slide, please. So we're going to move into the financial summary now. Next slide, please. And Mountain Line's revenue sources include contributions from each agency with service, as well as Arizona Department of Transportation, Federal Transit Administration, and then we have our fares and other contract fees. The revenues are paid directly to Mountain Line, but we do track all of that by service. And so this is just a very high level overview. Next slide, please. And so in fiscal year 2021, our total expenditures were a little over $12 million for all of the operations and capital expenses. The actual expenses were tracked, and then we compare those monthly to our budget, and we provide financial reports on a quarterly basis to the partner agencies that are listed here. Next slide, please. And so our total expenditures were just over $12 million for all operations and capital. And as you can see, salaries and benefits was the primary expenditure, and that was at about $6.8 million. Next slide. And so for our general fund, it does not support any staff, and so there's no salaries and benefits costs. The only expenditures that we tend to see in this program is for sponsorships, memberships, meetings, and general marketing services. Next slide, please. Oh, sorry, I just realized I accidentally closed my notes one moment. I'm so sorry.
While you're pulling those up, Laura Lee,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Lori, sorry. I have a cousin, Laura Lee, so I apologize about that.
That's pretty.
Lori, these charts, is there a way you could put like maybe the totals next to the legends? If you're going to keep the percentages in there, that's I think that's always helpful when I see these kinds of charts. Percentages are great to know,
Great.
but so are the dollars as well. So somehow incorporate the dollars into these, I think, is a good thing to do.
Okay. No, absolutely. Thank you for that. Okay, get pop back up here where I was at. Okay. So looking at specifically just the Flagstaff, City of Flagstaff expenditures, this total was almost $8.8 million, and that was the operating total. Now I'm all out of sorts now, with total expenditures at about $9.7 million. The rest was attributable to capital expenses or capital expenditures. And then again, our salaries and benefits, always the largest component, and that was just at about $6.6 million. Next slide, please. So for planning, the operating total was $256,000, with total expenditures at about $2.2 million. Capitalized wages always is the largest portion at 88%, and that results in overall operation savings. We're able to use grant funding to cover those wages, and so that always a nice savings for the city on that one. Next slide, please. For Coconino County, there's no capital expenditures, but the operating total was about $72,000 on that one. And next slide, please. Oh, and that's it. I got through that quicker than I expected. So,
Thank you.
So does anyone have any questions?
Any questions for Lori? It's a great presentation, Lori. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Shane. I appreciate the feedback.
No questions for Lori? Okay. No action by the TAC, right? On this is just review, right? Great, thank you.
We'll
move on. Yeah, thank you, Lori. Appreciate it. We'll move down then to the A2, I guess. Adopt the strategic investment plan. Estella, this is yours.
Thank you, Chair, members of the TAC. Estella Hollander, Mobility Planner with Mountain Line, and I'm here to provide information on the Strategic Investment Plan, or SIP, and seek adoption from the Board of Directors. Next slide, please. So the purpose of this plan was to develop strategies to optimize and maintain fixed route on-time performance, and to plan long-term for the implementation of those strategies in the capital and financial planning. This is not a consolidated plan, but includes various tasks and deliverables that we wanted a consultant to help us with. So there are four main components. The first task was an operations analysis of our system, So this included operator interviews as well as data analysis of our system to understand the types of delay. So this could include like dwell time with fare collection, as well as traffic congestion kind of hotspots, and travel time speeds, for example. Task 2 built upon this analysis and developed recommendations and strategies to improve reliability in our system. And then task 3 was a capital improvement plan, which also included an annual internal process to tie both the capital and the financial pieces together. And then task 4 reviewed our financial planning process, provided some recommendations, and also developed some funding suggestions for capital improvements. So next slide, please. And so this is just one example of some of the task 1 findings. Again, this is the operations analysis. So this chart shows the on-time performance of our system, which overall we have great on-time performance. It averages 91%, and this was from 2019 data. And so Route 14, which is shown kind of on that bluish gray color, is our lowest on-time performance. So this route is really the most need of priority investment and or schedule adjustments. And both 7 and 10 are highlighted because although on paper these routes don't look too bad, these do have some on-time performance, but due to the layover at the downtown connection center, the bus has 5 minutes. This kind of helps the route catch back up to schedule. However, from an operator's perspective, they really don't get a chance to get out of the seat. So these basically these 3 routes were kind of the main areas of concern for our system. Next slide, please.
Estella, back on that one slide, if you can go back on it, thank you. Why is 7 highlighted, Route 7 highlighted?
Yes, so this one, again, although it does have fairly high on-time performance, the fact that, each bus, or some buses are different, or different routes, but Route 7 has about 5 minutes layover time at the downtown connection center. And so it's able to catch back up their on-time performance, but then, it almost keeps on doing loops and the operator doesn't get a chance to get out of its seat. So that kind of 5-minute layover allows for some catch-up time. So again, on paper, this route doesn't look too bad, but really from kind of the operator comfort level, allowing them to have those 5-minute breaks. That's why this is a route of concern. Does that make sense?
So yeah, it does. Thank you. So what's ideal? I mean, ideal is to have 100% in that with enough time for the driver to get out of the seat. That's ideal, but where's the breaking point? I think it's important that drivers are able to get out of their seat periodically, stretch the legs, and do some push-ups or jumping jacks or whatever they want to do, right? So where's that breaking point?
That is a good question. I think, definitely, obviously 100 is always great, but I think we do have to be realistic as well. We don't necessarily have kind of those KPIs or key performance indicators specifically outlined. I do believe the Flagstaff in Motion plan, the 5-year plan that Busy Collins is working on with AECOM, will kind of help with some of those performance indicators, but we definitely like to keep it I wouldn't say if we're reviewing kind of year over year, making sure that we're not decreasing kind of year over year, that we are able to maintain our reliability in the system. And then definitely for those routes, again, like Route 7, where an operator is unable to get out, making sure that we're able to make those adjustments, because we definitely, want our operators to be able to, use the restroom, get a bite to eat, etc. Though that layover time is really the only time that they're able to get out of the seat. So it's important that we do provide those opportunities either through the scheduling adjustments or making any other route modifications or capital investments.
Thanks, Estella. I see, Kevin, I do recognize your hand. Let me just finish my quick thought here. So, I see other routes at 95%, 98%, 92%, even 90% for Route 8. Are those percentages acceptable to Mountain Line? And I assume that because they're not highlighted, those routes, even with those percentages, are enabling the drivers to get out of their seats a little bit. Grab some water, get a quick bite or something. I don't know. Is that correct? And so if the, like Route 7 at 93%, if the driver were to get out of their seat and take what is recommended by way of a little bit of a breather, what would that percentage drop to? And would that be unacceptable?
Mhm. I would say anything really above 90s is looking really good. So I think really that one with Route 7 is just that it is a quite stressful route. So just allowing the operators to have those breaks. I think, yeah.
Okay, thank you. Kevin, please.
Yeah, when I was looking at this data yesterday, I did find Route 14 to be a bit curious, especially when we realized that Route 14 is really just geographically the opposite of Route 4, which whose OTP is really pretty high. So, you know, in a little broader than details, but do we understand why it is that Route 14 running opposite 4 has such a difference in OTP?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, Route 14 is really, so the runtime is really more like a 40-minute route, but we're trying to kind of make it a 30-minute route. So that's why this route is really having some challenges. So I think, you know, we either need to decrease the frequency or think about adding another bus or things like that. So it really comes down to some of the run times compared to, or the estimated runtime compared to what the bus is actually doing with traffic and things like that.
Excuse me, Estelle, is that the one with all the left turns also?
Yes.
So it is,
That's
so those
right.
left turns create a little more delay than the right turns.
Yeah, good point, Dave.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. That is a good point.
Add a little to that. We did, so 4 used to also be a 30-minute runtime, and we did change it to a 40-minute runtime in the past. So now we're still trying to keep 14 at the 30-minute runtime, though we fixed 4. We just haven't wanted to reduce the frequency on 14, or nor do we have the funds to put the extra bus out to keep the frequency the same. So that's why that's why 1 has so much cushion. We went and invested in that runtime. We just haven't done it in 14 yet.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you.
Sounds like you can go ahead, Estella. Thank you.
Perfect, thank you. And so next slide, please, Rhonda. And so some additional task 1 findings is really the delay with our fare collection, especially with the paper fare media. So this is our day passes, which has kind of a receipt paper. And this came from the operator interviews that, you know, a lot of times people take a while for it to scan the day passes. Another finding was that, yeah, Milton, Butler, and Route 66 is really where we're seeing some of the high traffic, as well as really setting a priority for the transit supportive improvements. And then both the fare collection strategies and any sort of kind of capital improvements we were to put, it really is to maintain the current frequency. So it's not to increase frequencies, but really to increase the reliability in our system. So next slide, please. And so for some recommendations, the intent of this map is not to kind of view this in detail, but really just to see it in high level of some of the locations of where the improvements are located. So, and so in total, some of the transit priority measures include 18 locations for transit signal priority, or TSP, 6 locations for queue jumping, as well as some additional striping at the McConnell and Pine Knoll bus stop on Route 10, and some kind of bus stop relocations. And so this plan recommended prioritizing some of the transit priority investments along Milton Road as well as Butler Avenue. That's where kind of we'll see some of the greatest benefits. But of course, all of these recommendations will require some coordination with the road owner. So whether that is ADOT or the city. And it's also worth noting that, again, these capital improvements are really to maintain reliability in our system. But this plan also did outline some minor route modifications, which could increase frequency on some routes. And these recommendations will be further vetted in the Flagstaff in Motion plan that, again, Dizzy Collins is working on. So next slide, please. And some additional deliverables, again, kind of thinking of those 4 different tasks. This plan did develop a 10-year capital improvement plan, as well as the workflow process and some supportive documents, which included a capital project form, which ties the CIP and financial process together, as well as a prioritization matrix for capital projects. And then for the financial planning, helped develop a new increment request form, which kind of ties to our strategic goals. And then on the funding, also identified some creative funding mechanisms. However, all of these recommendations would really require coordination with City of Flagstaff, as well as even on the state level to implement some of these recommendations. Next slide, please. And so for next steps, we will be kicking internally off the annual CIP process. Also, some of these, again, route adjustments and modifications will be reviewed in the Flagstaff in Motion plan. It's worth noting that the SIP plan was very much internal. We didn't do any public outreach. So the Flagstaff in Motion, they are doing a lot of public outreach to get the public input on some of these recommendations. Some of the transit priority measures will kind of be, if future planning processes, things like that can be carried forward through those. And then the new increment form on the budget process can work on kicking that off internally as well. I believe this is the next slide. I guess, Ron, if you want to go to the next slide. And so that is it. We are, again, asking the board of directors to adopt the strategic investment plan. And I'm happy to take any questions or additional comments.
Any questions for Estella? Thank you, Estella. That was a great presentation. David. Are you muted, Dave? I saw your hand.
Yes, I'm muted. So Estella, you might want to spell out CIP. We were just in a meeting and I got taken to task for far too many acronyms. So the capital improvement program might be something you want to spell out. Then as far as the strategic investment plan, I know we had some conversations and you were generous with some of the data that we could use in a grant application. Are you satisfied with the end product? I know you were kind of looking to them for additional details to help you understand how they arrived at their conclusions, so that you can monitor conditions and other things. So how are you satisfied at the end of the process here?
Yeah, thank you for the question. I am satisfied. I think there's a lot of elements, a lot of pieces to this plan. Again, it's not kind of a traditional one document plan. There is a lot of different deliverables. Again, I think the capital improvement process is a big win for us, for Mountain Line, to kind of have a process that we can use each year. As well as there was also some cost per hour methodologies that we can have a kind of a better cost per hour for future routes. And definitely some of the analysis in that task 1, I think, will be really beneficial as we do make any sort of route modifications in the future, as well as for the 5-year plan. So yeah, there's a ton of information and I think a lot of great content and outcomes from this plan.
Great, thank you. And then there's obviously a lot of capital and other implications, financial implications as a result of this plan. How will the results of the 5-year plan and these dovetail or be coordinated in terms of setting priorities and coordinating expenditures?
Thank you for the question. And so currently, AECOM, who's the consultant on the Flagstaff in Motion plan, they've taken some of the route modifications and route adjustments and are kind of carrying that into their different alternatives. And again, that next phase will go to the public to get some feedback on those. And then in terms of some of the capital investments or the priority, the capital transit priority recommendations, those are included in the capital improvement plan that the consultants developed. And I think we'll need to, be further vetted, and depending on opportunities, grant funding opportunities, as well as, other corridor master plans, things like that, will need to, be incorporated in there for further vetting.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Any other questions for Stella? So I guess I do have one before we move on. Estella, the map that you showed that revealed the various capital improvements that would help some of the issues that you were talking about in the plan. Are you going to go into detail on those capital improvements with the board? Or are you just showing it at a high level that way? And do we have existing capital dollars tied to those projects? Or is that a planning effort yet to occur? Thank you.
Thank you. I was planning on showing it high level. However, if you find that there would be benefit in showing, or putting more detail and maybe listing the different locations, I'm definitely open to suggestions. All of the recommendations would be additional. These are would not be in our existing capital budget. So this would be either new money through, again, grant opportunities, or if we do end up passing a tax in the future, et cetera. So it's not in our existing capital budget.
And is that a point that you made and I just missed it, or?
That's something we can add. Mm-hmm. I can
Okay.
make that more clear.
I think it's important. At least I would appreciate that if I was a board member and listening to the presentation, identifying that none of these are currently funded. They would require new monies to come at play, whether it's a grant money or it's a new tax or whatever, but there's no current funding behind any of those projects. I think that's an important point to make.
Thank you for that suggestion. Mm-hmm.
Thanks. Okay, well, no other questions for Estella. Thank you, Estella. You walked us through it wonderfully well. Thank you.
Thank you, I appreciate it.
Moving on to item 3 under discussion and action items. Service to proposed Northern Arizona Healthcare Campus. The one and only Kate Morley is going to walk us through that one. Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Chair. Kate Morley, Deputy General Manager. So we haven't been to the board in a while on the Northern Arizona Healthcare potential move towards Fort Tuthill. And so this is really an informational item and an opportunity to just get feedback or discussion going with the board. Next slide, Rhonda. So we've been working hard, I should say Busy has been working very hard on putting together routing and cost estimates associated with what a route to serve the new facility would look like. And we've spent a lot of time refining those cost estimates and really trying to make them as low as possible. What do we really need to be able to bring in new revenue to support service out to the new site? And we've looked at it in 2 ways, and we've done this in coordination with the city manager's office. One is just looking at it to the airport, and one is looking at it only to the healthcare facility, and then the other is looking at it to the airport. And that's where we've been coordinating with the manager's office around if that's of interest to look at, if we're going to look at a route down to Fort Tuthill, and it is. So what you see in front of you is the potential route that would just go to the NAH, I'm just going to say NAH, the NAH campus at 20-minute frequency, which is our recommended frequency level for serving a hospital. Currently, the hospital has 2 routes that serve it, one at a 20-minute frequency and one at an hourly frequency. So roughly a 15-minute frequency, even though it doesn't quite play out like that in the schedule. It would take 3 buses for us to serve it at that level of frequency. And so the costs associated with running 3 buses to the site are $1.2 million essentially on an annual basis. That is just the variable cost of adding the new service. So we are not including my time, we don't need a new deputy general manager to do this. We're not including Heather's time. All those costs we've taken out of it. So it's really just the cost of running the service. We've also anticipated what capital costs would be. We're estimating that at $3.7 million. That's for buses and bus stops and pullouts, et cetera. And then we believe that we could build in those capital costs into our financial plan over time if we were preparing for it in advance. So really looking for the one-time upfront money, and then Mountain Line could prepare for the replacement costs over time. Next slide, Rhonda. And we did the same thing for what if we went to the airport, hoping that we could do it with the same 3 buses and there'd be some efficiencies there. But our analysis has found that it's too tight to do with the 3 buses. And so you have to add the 4th bus to the route. And so some of those cost efficiencies aren't seen, but we're still exploring this as an opportunity that may be worth investing in. We probably wouldn't recommend 20-minute service to the airport alone if it was a standalone route going there, but if it's coordinated with the NAH facility, then it makes sense, because we were trying to find efficiencies of not running every bus out to the airport, but you just end up with an operator standing down. So there's not great cost savings to not just running every bus out there. We estimate this at $1.4 million and $5 million one-time capital costs. Again, we could work in those capital costs to our financial planning process over time. And that's really the level of analysis we've done. There's a lot of detail behind this. We feel very good about the numbers that we've put forward in terms of being accurate and having slimmed things down as much as we can. And now it's really turning it back over to the city to say, here's what it would take to do this. What do you want to proceed with? And so next slide. So Heather and I drafted a letter that we sent to our chairman here and the city manager to talk about the options that we see available and our recommendations for funding this. And so we essentially have 2 alternative recommendations that are Mountain Line's preferred option. They would both be that there's some sort of dedicated and reoccurring funding to provide transit service to this area that is new revenue. So one is NAH could be directed that they need to give funding to the city of Flagstaff, and then the city would give that money to us as they do with the transit tax, or that the city could establish a special taxing district, which is done in other places to generate revenue specifically around the area of this route. So a geographic based tax instead of the sales tax, or instead of funded by NAH itself. Those are essentially, to Mountain Line, really of the same quality. One, I think, might be slightly more complicated. The second one might be slightly more complicated, which is why we put it as the alternative recommendation instead of just the recommendation, but really would defer to the city as to what their preference is. We also put up 3 alternatives, which are other ways this could happen, but are not Mountain Line's recommendation for moving forward. One is using general fund revenue. We don't love that from the city. We don't love that approach because we feel like it may not be stable. And to put operations out on the street, we really need a dedicated source that we know is committed to being there for the long term in order to put service out. We also put forward the option that we could consider reallocating existing transit services that we are providing to the hospital. So again, think 3 buses to provide that 20-minute service. We could take 3 buses from elsewhere in our system and put them down to the healthcare center. Of course, we don't love that. We've worked hard to build the system that we have. We're building towards frequency. That's what's identified in the 5-year plan itself, is the frequency. And we would have to take frequency to do that. We could potentially do that from Route 2, which is our most frequent outside of Route 10, that we just added that several years ago and saw about a 30% increase in ridership when we did it. Route 5 is our lowest performing route. There's conversation around you could take the bus off Route 5 since it is the lowest performing, but then the people in that area lose all service because there's no other bus on that route. So it's very complicated. There's other pieces too related to Title VI or equity. Looking at the distribution of who we're serving with our existing services. We can't necessarily just decide to take a route. We have to show from an equity perspective to FTA that makes sense to remove that service and give it to some other group of town. So it is an option. It's not our preferred option, but it is an option on the table for ensuring that there is service to a new medical campus. And then 5 is that nobody requires anything. We allow the hospital to move forward with no transit service. This is not recommended based on experience in other similar transit-oriented uses, I would say. So the shelter moved off of a route and now is on the Huntington corridor. We've been working hard to try to figure out how to serve them since we're doing our micro transit pilot. We're finding new revenues. It's an issue that comes in front of the board and elected officials and becomes something that we're asked to fix after the fact. And we'd rather have the plan up front. Same thing at the Sacred Peaks Medical Facility. Hearing a lot, I think the city and Mountain Line have heard a lot from the community about the need for transit service there. So something we're trying to Band-Aid fix afterwards. And that's not the position we want to be in with the hospital. We're sure that if the hospital were to relocate without transit service, it would become a political issue for both Mountain Line and the city council to figure out how to serve it after the fact. So we just wanted to have this conversation, put the options that we see on the table. Others may have creative options to put forward as well. We're open to ideas, but we just felt like there needed to be a succinct list of choices out there for people to be mulling over and considering. And that was our goal with writing the memo and putting it forward. So with that, I'll take any questions.
Thank you, Kate. Any questions for Kate on this important project for our community and how we serve that project? Dave, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good morning, Kate. Just on your presentation, I think I got lost on a couple things, so I'm looking for some clarity. On the one hand, you said we can cover those capital costs, and then another time you said we're looking for the upfront costs from NAH, and I kind of got lost in terms of the distinction between those. So you had one option said we have $3 million in capital, and then another option said we have $5 million in capital. That's what you need up front, and then you need the then you can support the replacement bus that was down at the bottom of the slide.
Yeah, so the difference between the 3 million and the 5 million is essentially the 3 buses to that are needed to do 20-minute service just to the NAH facility, and fewer bus stops than you need to go all the way to the airport. So
right, and I understand the difference between the
okay.
costs.
Yeah.
Just you characterized one as saying we need the upfront investment, and then you said you used the phrase something like we can cover those capital costs.
Yep. So
and you said that in both alternatives. So what are the difference between what you need and what you can cover?
Yep. Thank you for that. What I meant to say is we're looking for NAH or someone, shall I say, to come in and help us provide the initial investment of the 3 or 5 million. And then because bus replacements are a 15-year timeline, we believe that we can strategically work to include that in our financial planning process for the replacement of those items in 15 years. So we want the first round of buses and bus stop spot, and then we will work to incorporate those capital items into our financial planning process over time. So in 15 years, Mountain Line would buy the buses instead of NAH, or replace the bus stops. So that's what I meant to say. Is that better?
Okay, that's better. Thank you. That helps clarify. Then, Mr. Chair, if I may, you have $1.5 million somewhere in that vicinity of ongoing costs. Are you looking for NAH or someone else to cover those costs indefinitely, or do you have a time horizon where you believe sales tax revenue or other revenue being generated from the site would pick that up? Do you have a time frame for how long they need to support the operations?
So at this stage, I would say indefinitely. However, we're very open to exploring this as a a sales tax increase item with the community. So the Flagstaff in Motion plan will specifically get some feedback around whether the taxpayers are willing to fund it, in which case, as soon as we could collect and generate new sales tax revenue, we'd be happy to do that. Our gut is that the hospital is probably moving ahead of where Mountain Line is and having a sales tax increase. And so we do feel like there's probably at least some gap in there. And I think we question altogether, based on our last ask at the ballot, where the taxpayers are right now in prioritizing increased transit services. We don't think the last ballot measure was a hard no, but we know that there are a lot of community needs out there right now. And whether they would put Mountain Line services at the top of the list for new funding just feels really unclear at the moment.
Okay, so I just a note and then one last question. So I believe they're looking at the ambulatory center opening in 24 and the hospital opening in 26. So, you know, for the others in the room, there's the time frame that the hospital is looking at. And then, you know, if you were to drop to 30-minute frequency, and I know that's below what you recommended, does that does that save a bus?
Yes, that would save one bus essentially. And so you could approximate a third of the operating cost, or a third of the operating costs would come off of that, those cost estimates if we dropped it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Dave. Great questions. I really appreciate the clarification that Dave brought in his questioning, Kate, because that's how I heard, as you were running through those two slides, I heard the 3 million and the $5 million numbers as being numbers that you guys could absorb through your operations over time. And so it didn't come out as strong as it probably needed to in terms of, okay, here are our asks on the upfront. So I think Dave's point in asking for that clarification is a good message to take away from this. Yeah, so thank you. Any other questions for Kate on her presentation?
Yeah, this is Kevin. I have a question. For the, what are we calling this? A special taxing district and or tax specific service enacted. Anyway, are we assuming that the big payers for that would be NAH Airport and Fort Tuthill?
Yeah, I think the idea of why it's and it is more attractive to NAH than them just paying for the transit service is because they could distribute those costs to other development that will likely occur around the hospital. So once the hospital goes in, it's anticipated that that area of town would develop more fully. And so as more development came online, that could all be spread out through that geographic area as it came, as it came to be built. There's different ways that it can be done. One idea we've been exploring is a transit utility fee, which we've seen in other places where it's really on your utility bill. So obviously the more people that start getting utility bills, it's not NAH that's paying for it. It's the conference center that NAH is building. Those people are paying the utility bill instead of NAH, or the restaurants are paying the utility bill. So that's been, of the approaches, they like that approach as an option.
Well, yeah, I raised it really because existing neighborhoods, the two big ones, Ponderosa Trails and University Heights, were not looking to be directly served by the by either of the routes as it's laid out presently. But those are, details to come, I suppose.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, and why maybe we listed it as the funding is good, but it's harder to implement, and as the alternative recommendation. I think it would take quite a bit of effort to study, to set the right rates, to know what the geographic area is. It's definitely much more complicated to figure out.
Okay, great, thank you.
Thank you, Kevin. Appreciate that. Kate, what did you mean by NAH being a little ahead of Mountain Line?
In terms of, I think their development would come online before Mountain Line was generating any revenue from a new sales tax. So
Got it.
there is the potential for us to go in 2022. When that would start is a question mark, and it's a big question mark if we would even do that. And if the voters would support it, we could look again in 2024, 2026. But my guess is by the time we're generating revenue, the hospital will have already opened its doors.
Okay. Thank you. Hearing no other questions for Kate, I guess we can move on. Again, thank you, Kate, very much. The next item is one also we'll hear from Kate on, and that's the Downtown Connection Center update. Take it away, Kate.
All right. Rhonda will jump right into the next slide. Again, this is no specific direction, just an update. The board hasn't seen the latest plan sets, and we have done a bunch of work in the past couple months. So we're excited to share and get feedback. We're also going to kick off a bunch of public outreach here in September in preparation for getting our conditional use permit. So we want to make sure that they are involved in the outreach that we're doing. So what you see in front of you is a phasing plan. And this has been a big portion of what we've been working on over the past couple of months is how do we build this site in conjunction with the Rio de Flag project. And so we've come up with some phasing. And the green box on the left is phase 1. And that's really the administration building. It's out of the way of the Rio de Flag. We've got the funding in hand. We're ready to move forward with that. And so we'd like to get that done because costs are escalating so much and make sure that we have the money to build the building. The large pink box that you see, that's the bus bay area. That would be phase 2. That is right through the heart of where the Rio de Flag is going. And so we would coordinate on that after the building's done to figure out what makes sense for how to move forward. Hopefully the Rio's got some good information and timeline in place by the time we're ready to move forward with that. And then the third phase is a future parking structure, which is in the purple dashed line that's kind of on the north and eastern portion of the property. That would be a future parking structure to be delivered by others, but that Mountain Line is making sure can be accommodated as we design the site so that footers could be placed, et cetera. And we know that we're not eliminating the possibility for a future parking garage on the site. Next slide. So with that, you'll see that box that's the future parking garage on a lot of these diagrams, just so that you understand where that's coming. But this is brand new concept that we'll be wanting to show to the public here over the next month, where you can see that building over on the left. You start to see how the buses fit into the bus bays. You see some of the landscaping, the civic space portions for the South Side community, and then really leaving that eastern portion of the property alone for the time being. Along the top and kind of like a light green and green gray, you see future surface parking. That's surface parking that would be associated with phase 2. So with the bus plazas, there'd be an access way over from that Beaver Street lot and over to the north. We're still working through the design details of that. It's a complicated area with the Foots Trail coming out and other pieces. So that's why it's not fully defined right now, but that would be a parking area. Next slide. We've also, so with the building being the piece that's very defined right now, we're wanting to move forward and break ground next summer. So we've been working hard with the architect on advancing that while other things are still in that concept level planning phase. You may remember months ago, we talked about architecture that people liked, and the slide that you see in front of you shows a lot of those buildings and the feeling of buildings that people said they liked and wanted to see as a part of the Downtown Connection Center. We're excited about this. We took it to our stakeholders meeting yesterday and showed them, and they agreed that they like the feel of these buildings. This is the right direction to go in, and heard just general support from them, which was great. They're excited about the way it's shaping up. Next slide. And here's a very draft rendering of the building itself. Imagine those kind of colors and materials on this building. This is the view from Phoenix Avenue. and kind of the bus bays, maybe from Pizzicato, looking at the building-ish, if that's what we were doing. The architect is still working on renderings from Milton, which is obviously a very important component. I hope to have, I will have those by the time we go to the board. I just don't have them for TAC today. But we think it's looking pretty good. There's still refinements to make. Obviously, we've talked about trying to change the way the ADA access ramp works there at the beginning of the building. You see it kind of on the right side of the building at the moment. We went to the Commission on Inclusion and Adaptive Living, and they'd love to see that come in more by the stairways as an equitable way to provide access to the building to people who need a ramp to get up. The building does have to be elevated because of floodplain. We're looking at something like 3 to 6 feet. And so we do need to have the stairs and the elevation. So it's figuring out how to get the access into the building. But you see a big glass facade in the entryway. The roof would be designed to be solar ready if we don't have the funding to put solar panels on right away. But that would be a goal. And, you know, we want lots of natural light in the building, and we like the way it's headed. So next slide. These are our first drawings of the interior. We've done a lot of hand sketching with the architects, so we're excited to see this. This is the first floor of the building. Over there on the left side, you see a large conference room or a community room that could be rented out or used for other spaces. It has capacity for about 100 people in it. On the south side of the building there, or the bottom, you see a large kind of empty rectangle. That's the space that we're making available for human service agencies is the goal, but it is a standalone tenant space where if that doesn't work out, there's the opportunity to lease it to somebody else. But the goal is that human services could use that space since the accessibility at the DCC is so high for people who often need that. You see a decent sized lobby area, though it's not huge. It's shared by Amtrak and Greyhound if there's the opportunity to co-locate, so that's all been figured out to meet their needs as well. On the right-hand side or eastern side of the building that pop out there, that's really an operator space. It's the closest to the bus bay so that they have quick access in and out as they have those short recovery time periods at the DCC. We want to get them into the restroom, have the opportunity to get a quick drink and get back out on the road. The north of on the first floor, the north western side of the building is a lot of back of house stuff. It's an ops garage, it's the electrical rooms, etc. So not much happening there. It's kind of hidden up by the railroad tracks, so a good spot for that. Next slide. And then it is a 2-story building. So the second floor is really Mountain Line and Metro Plan office space. A lot of shared workspaces. We're trying to think about how we're going to use this in a post-COVID world and flexibility from work from home. So there are a lot of flex offices that could be shared. We do have office space for Metro Plan in the building. We're excited about the potential of sharing with them. It's not a huge area. If the partnership were to not work out for some reason, it's only about 4 offices. So something that we could probably just take over if we wanted to grow in the future. Next slide. And then civic space has been a big part of the conversation, obviously, as well. You can see, and I will for the public have AECOM change the light coloring of the surface parking lot up at the top. Again, you see that kind of gray shadow, like that to pop out a little bit more. But the idea is in phase 2, that would be green gray shadow would be a surface parking access and then surface parking lot. But there is the potential, if a parking garage were to come in, the civic space could actually extend underneath a portion of the parking garage. So they're showing the full build out, but there would be an intermediate phase there that didn't have that very northern part of the civic space. So we'll work on the graphics to make that more clear in the future, but pretty excited about where this is headed. The Southside community likes where it's headed. There's an idea around tree rings that's occurring with the civic space. The Southside community would like to see the sawmill history recognized. The tree rings telling of time is a theme that's come up. So that's where you see some of those circles. And then that plays into what the artist team is considering on the site as well. So it's coming together in a pretty neat way. Next slide.
Kate, could I interrupt
Yeah,
just for a
yeah.
second? If you could go back 2 slides.
sure. Or I'll have to ask Miranda to go back to slides.
That one.
Thank you. So this is the second floor, correct?
Yes.
With a platform for a potential co-housing with Amtrak, what's the thought about customers for Amtrak interacting with your building?
Yes,
So
we've been.
the lobby area on the first floor would be where they'd come in and take care of ticketing or what have you. And then the platform itself would be at a higher elevation. So what are your thoughts there? I had honestly anticipated seeing something on your second floor that handled that type of traffic use potentially. Thank you.
And I was with you, Shane. That's where I was headed. And then I've been talked out of it by the experts. So my thought would be that there would be a second floor deck essentially on the north side of the building that would somehow tie in for passengers. From a safety and security perspective, they've said, let's just really keep that second floor a secure area, much like the Mountain Line facility is now, and then have the access to the outside. So there are, on the bottom floor, there are exterior restrooms that have the opportunity to be opened for Amtrak passengers if we want. They would come in, use the customer service area. There is a baggage area there on the first floor as well. And then on the exterior actually is where there would be the stairway and elevator up to a second story platform, which would be associated and need a replacement of the Milton Bridge to be able to move forward. So that was, I was with you though, Shane. I was like, where's the access? But everyone, the information I got back is you don't actually want that platform connecting into your building. There's a lot of rattling that occurs on a railroad. It creates additional engineering challenges. It's better to just have it separated. So we're accommodating where the ramp up would go, where the elevator would go on the site, so that could all be built in the future. But the station itself would be co-located inside the building.
Thank you, Kate. And the on the first floor, I guess back one more slide, where would the are you still planning on an office or a place to work out of for PD or ambulatory service or anything like that?
Yep, great question. So if you see the front entrance door there into the lobby, the first office to the left is PD. So it has a view out to the platforms and out to the street. It's also the closest to the parking spaces, so that way they can get in and out as quickly as possible.
Is that kind of standalone little box with doors on either end of it?
That's the main entrance, so a double door entrance. And then just to the left, the first office to the left of it on the south side of the lobby is the PD office.
Okay, all right. Okay. Cool, thank you.
Yep.
Makes sense.
All right, so for a little comparison here, you can see the size of our the proposed civic space compared to Heritage Square. Again, what we're comparing in acreage is really the full build out of the space and not what would happen while there's the interim surface parking. So it's actually very similar to the size of Heritage Square, which is obviously a nice and well-functioning civic space area. So our landscape designers tell us that's really good. That's where we want to be in terms of the scale of this. Next slide. And then here's more of a cross section for you. So the idea is that most of the civic space is hardscape, and it allows the opportunity for the festivals that the South Side is looking for. You can see a picture there of an example of an existing civic space that extends under a parking ramp, much like what we're saying could happen here underneath a parking garage. So that's the example. And then as you move to the eastern side of the property, there's still the open channel of the Riota flag. And so that would move into more of a natural landscaping area. Right now, that is what's there, but through the Rio de Flag process, that'll get torn out. So it's more about the way you put it back, make it a little bit more park-like, more usable than what it currently is, which is really just overgrown greenery. So turning it into functional green space instead of just green space. Next slide. And then this, I just wanted to touch on the artist team. So that theme of sawmill and trees and tree rings has been coming up. You can see on the bottom right there, they've got a proposed grove sculpture that you would see in the spot where the blue circle is on the photo above. And then you could see on the blue lines on the overhead view of the civic space, this idea of a grove with seating and benching all made out of wood. And then the tree rings along these items are all telling the history of the South Side. So it's obviously a very rough sketch at this point, but think grove. Next slide. And with that, that's what we wanted to present, just give the feedback and update before we move forward to P&Z, make sure we've got our board support in doing so. And we are continuing to revise these drawings on a daily basis. I think I get an updated set. So we'll likely put the latest in before the board. It might be slightly different from what the TAC sees, but the major components are pretty set in place at this time. So any comments or questions?
Thank you, Kate. Any comments, further comments or reactions, thoughts to Kate's presentation on the Downtown Connection Center? A lot of hard work there, Kate, for sure. Hearing none, I do have one comment just in general, Kate. And I think it's a very delicate balance in messaging. The reality is likely going to be that the surface parking is what we find out there initially in stage 2. The structured parking, probably something to occur if and when the stars align, community will, financing, whatever. The way that those, and maybe this is incredibly difficult to depict in drawing, but the way that those slides are presented, it could show what you're missing in terms of civic space, because you have to have surface parking. And I think my personal preference would be not to have something in competition with the surface parking, but to show how much more we can expand once we do the structured parking. So, the way it was presented is it gave the feel like the surface parking is in direct competition instead of showing, okay, this is what it's going to look like initially with surface parking, because that's going to likely be what the reality is. And if the community, ever gets to a point where we have structured parking in place, this is how we could expand further. Does that make sense? It's a delicate balance in the messaging, but I also want to manage those expectations, because the reality is the reality, and I don't want, and neither do you or anybody on the Mountain Line team. We want this to be successful, and I just think the best we can manage those expectations and show a picture of what that civic space is going to look like with surface parking there, and then how it can be expanded if we were ever to find ourselves in a place where we could actually build this structured parking. Because if I just cut it off, it looks like it's an incomplete civic space. It looks like it's been robbed, or does that am I making sense in what I'm trying to communicate?
Yes, you make great sense, and I will have AECom fix it. I'm with you.
Okay, so with surface parking, there should be a complete picture on what you guys plan to have there for civic space, assuming that surface parking is going to go in, and then how we can expand it and make it even better if we ever get to a place where we can have a structured parking lot there.
Yeah,
Okay,
great.
yeah.
I will
All right.
do that for sure.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. Have those pictures been widely circulated at this point with, stakeholders and IDS and whoever else?
No, so the stakeholders have seen them as of yesterday, but we talked through that. We talked through the phasing issue specifically around that topic, because I agree that the pictures don't depict it very well. But it's not up on any websites. I mean, well, I guess it's part of our TAC packet. That's what, and now on the web through this presentation, but hopefully anyone seeing it can listen to the conversation. I don't think we have that many viewers of our TAC.
We're not a Simon Sinek broadcast on YouTube. Okay.
Maybe, who knows? I could be wrong.
All right. Well, I appreciate the receptivity to that comment. I know there's going to be a lot of interest as more and more eyes in the community have an opportunity to see these illustrations, and pictures are worth 1,000 words for sure. At least that's true in my mind, and so I appreciate that. Any other comments for Kate? Great presentation. Okay, hearing none, we'll go into the COVID update. Heather. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the Transit Advisory Committee. At our last board meeting, the board did ask that we provide an update on how things are going with our response to COVID and how COVID has impacted our system. So the staff report provided in the packet includes several bullet points, just talking and illustrating how things are going in response to COVID. So I'll run through those briefly with you. After the board meeting in June to update the reopening plan, we did reopen the lobby, and we've been operating under normal hours of service and days of the week, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday, since June. We have seen an increase in customers with student pass sales, but prior to that, we definitely are seeing less people in our lobby than we have in the past. We did return all staff to normal working conditions, so everyone's back in the building. We do have some flex schedules and work from home shifts that are being offered under our new flexible working policies, and also to facilitate use of shared spaces. The federal mask mandate was amended in August, and so we are still operating under the federal mask mandate, and that was extended to January of 2022. That does cover our facilities, our bus stops, and our vehicles. So all staff in the building, when not working alone in their offices, are wearing masks, as are our drivers, mechanics, and other staff that support our systems. And of course, we're asking our customers to comply with the mandate. We do provide masks on our vehicles and in our facilities, and have just ordered more. We are seeing an increase in the need for those masks and mask distribution since school has begun. We continue to limit in-person meetings and travel. One challenge with in-person meetings is if we hold a meeting in our building, everyone must be masked for the duration of that meeting. It does present us some challenges with speaking and communication and presenting. And so we are continuing with majority of meetings in an online environment. Staff is roughly 70% vaccinated. Right now, we have no intent to mandate a vaccine, and we are not offering any incentives, although we continue to provide information to staff on those vaccination opportunities. Ridership and demand for transit services has remained low through the summer. We are seeing a slight uptick in ridership with the return of the different school programs, K through 12, as well as the different college programs. I will say paratransit reached about 40% of typical demand and bus ridership 60%, based on just where we were at pre-COVID. And then the last bullet point, the last part of that bullet is that we did see a jump in pass sales for students. So I think our front desk said record-breaking pass sales for both K through 12 as well as college programs this year. Lori did touch on ridership and wanted to note that while overall ridership was less than 50% of typical ridership, fare collection was about 80% of the budget. And then kind of related to revenues, we did see an 18% in transit tax collection from the city of Flagstaff. And of course, we received a $10 million in federal funds to help offset our operating cost and increased operating cost. So we did have some unanticipated costs during COVID, cleaning specifically and materials to clean. The driver barriers were unbudgeted. All of those costs, we really used our CARES Act money to help offset. And probably our biggest impact right now is that we continue to see a pretty significant staff shortage, specifically in our operations division. We're about 25% below our full-time staffing equivalent. And that's creating an atmosphere where we are mandating overtime for our other staff members. So we continue to seek new ways to recruit and be appealing as an employer. We know there are several factors in the shortage or lack of job seekers. One of them, I believe, is the legalization of marijuana, as well as increasing concerns about exposures as a transit operator. So that's where we stand really with our response to COVID. I did include under the fiscal impact that really the loss of fares was anticipated. I shared with the chairman just before the meeting that all told, we ended the year in a pretty good financial position, almost on budget, and really close to the revenues that were budgeted, which you'll see detailed out in the annual report when Lori shares it in a couple of weeks as a written document. And Mr. Chairman, with that, that's all of the updates I have on COVID, but I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions for Heather on her COVID update? I think it goes without saying, Heather, we are all just anxiously waiting the day when we don't have to worry about COVID anymore. Don't know if that day is ever going to come, or if the norm has completely shifted. But either way, we're all with you and continuing to work through the COVID issue. So thanks for the update. Oh, okay, so moving on, we're now in section B, progress reports. This is largely handled as kind of a consent where we don't go into detail, but staff will be prepared to walk the board through a general update on consulting services, a program that is couple of years in the works now on human trafficking prevention. Thanks for the update on that, Heather, this morning. That's an exciting program. The K through 12 student program. Does anybody have any specific questions about either of those programs before we turn the time over to Heather for her update on current events? Any of those three: consulting services, human trafficking, or the K through 12 student program update? Okay, hearing none. Heather, turn it over to you for a summary of current events. Thank you.
Sure, of course. Thanks for that. I just have a couple of quick announcements and good news to share with you. We did receive notice last week that we were successful in our application for $4.3 million for our shared use CDL training and testing course. We appreciate the partnerships that helped us get that grant award, and thank the City of Flagstaff, Coconino County, the community college, as well as Northern Arizona University, which is really one of the major partners on that, as that they are looking to provide the local match for that grant. So we're very excited to see that move forward. In addition to that, in the same award, we did receive $300,000 for support vehicles. This will allow us to convert over many of our administrative and support vehicles from fuel burners to electric or hybrid electric vehicles. And we're pretty excited to make that change. Staff here, we have one vehicle that is well over 10 years old and no one likes to drive it. So it's nice to see that be replaced with safer and more updated vehicles. We received a contact from Coconino County and a new partnership that will bring about $100,000 to Mountain Line, allowing us to buy passes and help distribute passes to support social detriments of health. And we're pretty excited about that partnership. That will be new for us. And that was, I'm going to look to Kate to confirm, but I think that was county triggered phone call. So that's something they called us about. And we're pretty excited about it. Our leadership team, which includes all of our managers, supervisors, and individuals seen as leaders in our agency, have been out helping do the public surveys to support Flagstaff in Motion. I have received feedback about how much fun that has been to be on the routes and on the buses and connecting with our riders to really ensure that we're reaching a wide audience with those public surveys. I think on the call, we have Jeremiah McVicker. I didn't see him on video, but I think he's here. Jeremiah was recently promoted. Jeremiah started out as a transit operator with us several years ago, and he has been promoted to our maintenance manager. So he will be overseeing our fleet and facilities department. And we're pretty excited to see him move into that position and bring his training and expertise to that role. Kate, our deputy general manager, did do a bus ride with Supervisor Begay from Coconino County Board of Supervisors to introduce her to our routes and systems. I'll be doing something similar with Supervisor Vasquez in the coming weeks, and we're excited about their interest in learning more about transit and how transit works. Related to the DCC, we have a couple virtual open houses coming up September 15th and 30th. If you would like more information on those events, we certainly welcome your attendance and participation. And then lastly, I will share that we have 13 anniversaries in the month of September, and all combined is 122 years of experience. 13 people, 122 years of experience. Pretty impressed with that number. I'll share a couple of the big numbers with you. Grace Charlie has been with our paratransit division, she actually worked for Van Gogh before we became Mountain Lift. She's been with us more than 20 years, but in her most recent seniority, 13 years. Carlos Lorenzo and Rich Felipe are with our bus division, both with 16 years now with the agency. Sam Short, who spoke a little bit earlier, started out as our dispatcher and moved into safety, and he has 11 years with the agency. And our very own Estella Hollander has reached her 4th anniversary. So there's just a couple glimpses of some of those longer terms that we have in those 13 anniversaries this month. And with that, that's everything I have for current events. Would be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Heather. Any questions for Heather on her her summary of current events? Okay, thank you, Heather. Appreciate that. I think we're down to the end of our agenda. Wanted to identify that our next meeting. Do we have? This is September, so our next meeting in October is our board advance, board and TAC advance, where we meet together. So that's October 20th, 9 o'clock in the morning. That's for a few hours, right, Heather?
Correct. We're planning 9 to noon, and it will be a virtual event. We were hoping to welcome everybody back with our first in-person in 18 months, but with the mask mandate, we have decided to stay in a virtual environment.
Great, understandable. Thank you, Heather. Mm-hmm. So we've got the October 20th as our advance together with the board, and then November our meeting is backed on regular schedule, so it'll be Thursday, November 4th at 10 a.m. Wanted to just check back in. We don't have any other things we need to cover today. Is that correct, Heather?
That is correct. That's everything on our agenda for today.
All right. Well, thanks for the time, everybody. If there's no questions from the TAC group, and I'll give a pause here for that. Hearing none, I think we're adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great holiday weekend.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Great weekend.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Bye.